not. So just be thinking about that. And to help us be thinking about that, I want to tell you about a time in my life when I greatly benefited from having a teacher, an instructor, a guide, maybe even a pro, if you will. And that is when I learned to snowboard, okay? Now, I know we're a mountain bike town, but anyone here engage in winter sports? Any skiers, snowboarders here? A little bit? Okay. Well, I love to snowboard, and I know I'm going to have to get into mountain biking because I'm in Fruita now. But before I came here, I lived in Breckenridge, and snowboard capital of like the world, and I love to snowboard. But I did not start snowboarding until the age of 26, which I am the age I am now. That doesn't sound that long ago. But in the world of snowboarding, not starting snowboarding until the age of 26 is unheard of. I started as a geriatric snowboarder almost, okay? Because most people start snowboarding in like their teens and when they're 10, and when they get to their upper 20s, they usually go to skiing. I don't understand it. But anyway, I did not touch a snowboard until I was 26. And I knew that if I was going to do this and not completely wreck myself, I was going to need someone to teach me. And so my first couple days, I was part of a lesson, had a pro teach me how to snowboard. How you stand on the board. The first thing you learn is how you fall without completely breaking something. That's always important. So I had someone teaching me how to ride. And I'll tell you this, that was a long time ago because I don't know if y'all caught on, I'm not 26 anymore, okay? So I've been snowboarding for a while, and I learned more those first 2 days because I had a pro teaching me than I have learned on my own since. And life is like that. There's so much that we can learn on our own, but when we have someone teaching us, it just usually goes better. And so when we're talking about Jesus as a teacher, we're talking about someone who knows more than we do. And I'll tell you this, church, if you came in here thinking that you got everything figured out, I got nothing for you, okay? You can go do something else. If you got everything figured out and you're crushing it at life in every way and you're perfect, I got nothing for you on this Sunday morning, okay? Go have fun. If you don't have everything figured out, and if you got stuff you're working on and in ways you're growing, you're in the right place. Because that's what following Jesus is all about. Jesus is all about following a teacher to help us grow to become the best version of ourselves. And Jesus, being Jesus and being great at pretty much everything, is a great teacher. Now I'm going to teach you a word for this week. One of my jobs as a pastor is every now and then to help you learn a big fancy word, okay? Some of those words will be from the Bible and be Greek. This is not one of those days, okay? The big fancy word for this week is about teaching, and the big fancy word for this week, and I think I'm going to say it right, but I may not because I am not the expert in this field. But the word for this week is pedagogy. Okay? Can you all say that with me? Pedagogy. And pedagogy is the art and maybe even the science of how you teach. All you that have been educators have probably heard that word before. You're pros in it. But pedagogy means there's a way that you impart knowledge and wisdom to someone so that it's not just you throwing it at them, but it's done in a way that they remember and take in, and it helps them grow in their knowledge or their experience. And Jesus, as a master teacher, is great at pedagogy. Because here's the thing, not all of us learn in the same way. Not all of us learn in the same way. Some of us can read a book, and we'll learn, and we'll just pick up facts and knowledge and be great. Some of us need experience. Some of us need to literally get our hands dirty. And Jesus has all these different ways as a master teacher to help us understand who he is and what he's about. Now, one of the ways you can learn is in a tactile way, using your senses, smell, touch, sight, hearing. I'm just going to ask right now, and show of hands, and you can be more than one. You can be more than one. But is anyone here a tactile learner? Like you learn good? Yep. Awesome. Okay. Awesome. Yes. And again, you can be more than one. So don't, if there's other ones that come up, still raise your hand if it's you. But you can be a tactile learner, meaning if you're doing stuff with your body involving your senses, you're going to learn something better. And Jesus has got us on that. Last week, we celebrated the sacrament of communion with bread and juice, something we can literally taste and smell and feel that engages our senses. And in that engagement of our senses as tactile learners, we remember Jesus, those teachings, those sayings. And so Jesus, if you're a tactile learner, Jesus has got you when we gather around that communion table. Another way we learn, maybe audibly. Like, let me ask you this. Who all has watched a TED Talk before? Who all has watched a TED Talk? Yeah, TED Talks, all the rage. And all they are is people talking about stuff they're passionate about. And that may be one way you learn. If you learn audibly through words and stories and lessons, Jesus has got you. Because Jesus, the teacher, and you can read him for yourself in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in the Bible. Jesus is all about the stories and the lessons and the parables. Jesus spent most of his time teaching, using words to help us grow, to let us know what he's about and what it means to be a follower of Jesus. And again, you can look for those things yourself. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, right there in the Bible. Now, another way we can learn, and this last one I'll talk about today, but there's infinite numbers of ways you can learn. But one of the ways we can learn is experientially, meaning that you learn best by going and trying something for yourself. Who all here is an experiential learner? I'm going to raise my hand big on that one. Gets me in trouble sometimes. Like, I ain't reading no directions. I'm just going to figure this out on my own. Sometimes that works. I got plenty of accidents to let you know it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes read the directions. They can save you a lot of heartache. But some of us are experiential learners, and Jesus meets us there too. In what we read today from the Gospel of Luke, Jesus even invites us to try stuff out. And what we heard from the Gospel of Luke, Jesus says, here, let me break it down for you. If you are someone who takes in what I say, those words and those stories and those lessons, and you apply them to your life, you live them out, you experience them for yourself, you are going to notice a difference. Jesus says, if you take these words and these lessons and these parables that I'm giving you, and you put them into your life, it will be like you are building your house upon the rock. And when those things of life come, those storms of life, those things that are unsettling, you're still going to be there because you've built your house on that thing that endures. You've embedded those lessons that are true and eternal into who you are. And when life gets rough, you're still going to be there and you're going to make it through. And what Jesus is saying in this is he is inviting us to make his teachings part of who we are and how we live. And he also says in those words from the Gospel of Luke, Jesus is saying, don't take my word for it. Try it out and see for yourself. Because Jesus also says there in the Gospel of Luke, look, here's something. You got a tree, right? If that's a good tree, it's going to bear good fruit. If it's a bad tree, it'll bear bad fruit. If it's an apple tree, you'll get some apples, especially in this part of the world. You're going to get some delicious fruit. Oh my gosh. Cherries right now? I went cherry picking at a neighbor's tree. So good. Because if it's a good tree, there'll be good fruit. If it's a bad tree, you'll get bad fruit. And what Jesus is saying here is that look at the results. Of all the things you can take in the world, all the teachings, all the lessons, all the experiences, what's the result in the lives of others, in the lives of our world, in your life, in the life of your community? And what Jesus is saying here is, I've given you all these teachings. Try them out. See what the result is. If it bears good fruit, that's the foundation you're looking for. And that's how Jesus, as the teacher, invites us to grow and become a better version of ourselves, to work on those growing edges, to be a person that is more loving and kind and merciful. And Jesus is inviting us still today to try out those lessons for ourselves. And I want to invite you this morning to think about what kind of fruit that could bear in your life and in our world. One of those teachings that Jesus, the teacher, gives to us is what's called the golden rule, which is treat others the way you would want to be treated. Now, I hope I'm not bursting anyone's bubble today, but that's not the world we've built. Our communities, our systems, how we treat each other. I don't know if y'all been on the internet lately, and by lately I mean since forever. We do not treat each other the way we would want to be treated. And Jesus is inviting us to look at the result. Look at the fruit that is in our lives and in our communities and in our world. And Jesus is inviting us, and it's not a command. Jesus doesn't give a whole lot of commandments, but he gives a lot of invitations. Jesus is inviting us, inviting you to be someone who knows and applies those lessons that he has for us. Now, here's the thing about learning. When we learn something new, so often that means we have to unlearn something else that we have been taught, either implicitly or explicitly. In our reading today from the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus recognizes this. And our Gospel for Matthew today comes from what's called the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus gives all these teachings. Like if you need some place to start with Jesus, start with Matthew chapter 5, where Jesus gives these teachings. Try them out. See if they work for you. See if your foundation's a little firmer, the fruit's a little better. Try it out. And one of the things Jesus says over and over again in the Sermon on the Mount when he's giving these teachings is he starts each one by saying, "You have heard that it was said." Meaning, here's what you've learned before. Here's what you've seen. Here's what's been taught. Here's what's been practiced. Here's how your systems and your worldviews have been built and constructed over generations and millennia even. And then Jesus will say, "But I tell you, but I say to you," and then he will say pretty much the exact opposite of what you've heard and what you've learned before. Because you see, a big part of learning, if we're going to be open to the teachings, is we're going to have to unlearn the things that we've learned so that we have room and capacity to learn the things that Jesus is teaching us. And what we heard today from Matthew chapter 5 shows how much we have to unlearn. And what we read today from Matthew chapter 5, Jesus says, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye." And here's the thing. Those words were not just proverbial sayings. Those are literal words of Scripture from the law, the Torah, in the Old Testament. And Jesus is saying, you've heard that. You've seen it. You've practiced it. That's one of the rules of your community and your society and your system. How's that going for you? What kind of fruit has that old way of doing things borne? And Jesus then says, "But I tell you, regardless of what you've heard and what you've practiced and what's been the norm for millennia and centuries, regardless of what you've learned up until this point," Jesus says, "But I tell you." Instead of seeking vengeance and trying to make things square for you, Jesus says, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. And I'll tell you this, friends, we live in a world where we can see the bad fruit that those old teachings and those ways of doing things that we know and love have borne. We live in a world where there is still plenty of racism and poverty and violence and war and oppression to go around. We've tried that. How's that working for us? Jesus instead is saying, there's a better way. There's a new way. There's teachings, a way of being human that leads not to what you're used to in that bad fruit, but leads to something better, to that good fruit of life. And friends, it doesn't matter who you are or who you aren't, what you've done or what you failed to do, where you're at in life, how young or how old, we're all looking for that good fruit. We're all wanting that firm foundation. Because life ain't easy. There are storms out there. Things come and things go. Life is always in transition and change and flux. And with Jesus, we are invited to seek those things, those ways, those teachings that are eternal and lead to life abundant for ourselves and our community and our world. So here's the invitation we are receiving today, and we receive each and every day from Jesus, our teacher. You are invited to go out into your world, your life, your school, your community, your friends, your family, and you are invited to be that person that is trying, and we're never going to get it perfect, but to be that person that is trying to follow those teachings of Jesus, to be that person that turns the other cheek, to be that person that seeks the goodwill for all, to be that person that is less focused on yourself and more focused on others and the betterment of your community and your world. And when we do those things as individuals and when we do those things as a community, the world gets just a little bit better. We get just a little bit closer to that vision that God has for us and for all of the world. And so as you live your life, the rest of today, this week that's ahead, and whatever life may hold for you, you are invited to build your life upon that firm foundation, those teachings of Jesus that lead to life, so that as you experience grace, you share grace with others. As you experience goodness and mercy, you share goodness and mercies with others. As you experience the generosity of God, you are generous with others in your community. And friends, that's some good fruit. That is the stuff of life that we are invited to experience and celebrate as we follow Jesus, our teacher. Amen. As we close our time together this morning, we're going to close in song. And that closing song is called Together We Serve. And this song gives melody and rhyme and voice to the calling and the teachings we have from Jesus. That as we seek to follow Jesus together, we serve together. And Daryl's got some slides to work through there from the sermon, so we'll just let those, you can just flip all through those. Little clicker wasn't working today. That's all right. So anyway, there's some cool pictures you can look at. But anyway, as we're doing that, I want to invite you to stand in body and in spirit as we prepare to lift our voices in our final hymn, Together We Serve. It's number 2175 in the black hymnal, The Faith We Sing. Together we serve, a glorious feast. We work and we pray through sorrow and joy, extending your love to the last and the least. We seek to become a beacon of hope, a lamp for the heart and a light for the feet. We learn year by year to let love shine through until we see Christ in each person we meet. We welcome the scarred, the wealthy, the poor, the busy, the lonely, and all who need care. We offer a home to those who will come, our hands quick to help, our hearts ready to dare. Together